Hello everyone, welcome back to this channel. And if you haven't subscribed, please do so to keep this content coming, to also help other people who are also looking for this information or who might find this information useful. Today we'll be delving into Athol Fugard's powerful novel titled Tsotsi. This is the novel that is done in South Africa in the grade 11th year of high school. So, today we'll be exploring chapter 1, which is setting the stage for the rest of the story or the novel. And without wasting any time, I'm just going to quickly delve into basically the summary of chapter 1. Now, in chapter 1, we are introduced to Tsotsi, who is a young gang leader in a South African township. As you see that the novel is set in during apartheid times, and basically this township life then was basically a disaster. So we'll see these as we carry on. So throughout the novel, we see glimpses of his life, especially in the first chapter, his gang, as well as the violence that surrounds him. The chapter sets a dark and gritty tone, drawing us into Tsotsi's world. Now, if we take a closer look at Tsotsi himself, and as well as these are some of the questions that we can maybe think about: what motivates him? What kind of a person is he becoming, or he is? And we'll also look at his actions, his thoughts, and interaction with others to actually better understand him as a character. Now, Chapter 1 introduces some key themes that will run throughout the novel. We'll explore these themes as we move on, including violence, survival, as well as identity. We'll also look at how do these themes relate to Tsotsi's world and the broader context of South Africa during this time. It is also important to understand the historical and cultural context in which Tsotsi is written or was written. We'll also touch on the apartheid era and how it influenced the lives of people in South African township. There had been a silence, as always happened at about the same time. A long silence when none of them moved, except maybe to lift up a glass and hold it high over their heads for the dregs to drip into their open mouths, or to yawn and stretch and then slump back into their chairs. When one of them might scratch himself, another consider the voice of the woman in the backyard, the old woman who was scolding, rattling her words like stones in a tin, and all of them in their own time looking at the street outside, and then the shadows wondering if they were not yet long enough. It was not a deliberate silence, there was no reason for it, being at first just the pause between something said and the next remark, but growing from that because they were suddenly all without any more words. It ended, as always happened, at about the same time, when the young one, the youngest of the four, the one who had said the least, who had sat there and listened to the other three, the one they called Tsotsi, leaned forward and brought his slim, delicate hands together, the fingers interlocking in the manner of prayer. The other three looked up at him and waited. Before that, one called Boston had been telling his story. Boston always had a story. He started early in the afternoon when they came together in Tsotsi's room and settled down with the first bottle of beer, telling it from then for a long time, almost to the hour when the shadows were long enough. And Tsotsi told them what they would be doing for the night. He told it slowly, taking his time, the words coming in easy rhythm between the swallows of beer, the belches, the bother of opening another bottle, and the other interruptions like leaving the room for the backyard where you rested against the hot corrugated iron fence with an outstretched arm and pierced into the sand and watch it soak up and dry away before you left the spot. When he got back, he would ask, "Where was I?" And sometimes someone remembered, and most times no one cared because it wasn't important. All that mattered was that his voice filled the reluctant last hour of an afternoon. Okay, if you look at what we've just read, you see that the group seems to have a routine or a moment of silence that occurs regularly. The youngest member's gesture of leaning forward with hands interlocked in prayer draws attention of others. Now, maybe if you look at this routine, you'll see that this routine indicates more. If you look at the first line or the first 5 opening lines of this chapter, it says, "There had been a silence as always happened at about the same time." Now, what does this mean? This basically points to the routine, that this is something that always happens. The gang usually get together, they sit in silence, and then what do? It says a long silence when none of them moved except maybe to lift up a glass and hold it high over their heads for the dregs to drip into their open mouths, or to yawn and stretch. So this also signifies boredom and lack of purpose. They come together, they sit, they drink, they yawn. Again, this suggests boredomness, and stretch, and then slump back into their chairs. All this is pointing to boredom or lack of purpose. Now it says, when one of them might scratch himself, another consider the voice of the woman in the backyard. The old woman was scolding, rattling her words like tins, like stones in a tin. Now, if you see these lines, they tell us that the gang comes together, they sit in silence, or they listen to the stories, as we see when we continue reading. Scratching, yawning, drags to drip into open mouths. All these are basically suggestive that the gang is bored, they've got nothing to do, they lack purpose. So, and also that this is a usual. Now, this is just a microcosm of what is happening in the township. This is basically what the youth and maybe the older generation get up to. They have nothing to do, they've got no jobs. They just sit around and they intoxicate themselves. They sit and drink and they get involved in crime, as we see here. So this setting introduces how the township life is. Now, it says also in terms of routine, says it was not a deliberate silence. There were no reason for it, being the first just a pause between something said, the next remark. And then it also says, but growing from that, because they were suddenly all without any more words. So imagine sitting in a township or sitting somewhere in a township, in your room, in your shack, where you've got nothing to do. So these guys, they come together, they sit here, they wait for the shadows to be long enough. They are waiting for the sun to set so that they can do crime, so they can rob and kill people. Again, why do they do this? It's about survival. So yeah, so that's basically the scene that is painted here. Tsotsi and his gang members. Now, you would see that here, Tsotsi is a leader. He appears to be someone with influence. He's the one that decides what the gang will be doing for the night. As you see here, it says, the one they called Tsotsi leaned forward and brought his slim, delicate hands together, the fingers interlocking in the manner of prayer. The other 3 looked up and waited. Again, this basically positions Tsotsi as a leader. He's the one who decides what they do. When he moves, when he motions with his hands, the gang is ready to take instructions. Now, Boston is introduced as somebody who tells stories, and also quote says Boston always had a story. And this is somebody who was good at telling stories and who will tell his story for a long time. So basically, this is how the gang spend their time, listening to Boston stories, drinking, smoking. Yeah, so that's basically what is presented by this page here. Now, he started early in the afternoon when they came together in Tsotsi's room and settled down with the first bottle of beer, telling it from then for a long time, almost to the hour when the shadows were long enough, and Tsotsi told them that they will be what they will be doing for the night. Again, like we said, Tsotsi is positioned as a leader. He decides, he calls their shots, and they just execute whatever he says. So basically, that's what we find in these pages. Now, if you look at the atmosphere here, beside the fact that there is that of boredom, you see that the description of silence, the shadows growing long, and the group's quiet attention to Tsotsi. This basically creates a tense or and an atmosphere that is ominous. It will actually help or for me to maybe pause a bit here and talk about the life in a South African township during apartheid era. Now, you would actually know that life then was basically marked by poverty and inequality. Now, townships were often under-resourced. They had limited access to basic services like electricity, water, and sanitation, as we will see when we get to chapter 8. And some of these glimpses are basically shown as we read here. And then also, townships were frequently overcrowded, leading to poor living conditions and health problems. And then, other than that, townships were often plagued by violence and crime, as well as gang activity, which is basically how the novel continues. So, in a way, the apartheid policies restricted access to education, employment, as you see, which is as a result of them being bored, sitting around here doing nothing and involving themselves in crime. So this came as a result of some of the apartheid policies which restricted access to education, employment, and economic opportunities, perpetuating poverty and inequalities. And believe it or not, a person will always try to break all the rules and try to find other means to provide for themselves, as we see the gang here actually is doing that. And then also you will see, I think also in chapter 8, the mention of people disappearing and the resistance and activism against apartheid was one of the things that will be mentioned, or there are maybe glimpses of it, which actually led to the disappearance of many people. So, in a way, the novel is exploring these harsh realities of life in a township during this era, as we see here, which basically includes the struggles of youth or young people like Tsotsi and his friends and the rest of other people that are not mentioned here. Like I said, that this is basically just a microcosm of the township life. So if you see the reflection or the depiction of Tsotsi's life and his gang members is basically a smallest percentage. So it's just a tip. So there are a lot of other people like Tsotsi That's it for today. Thank you for joining us. And if you have not subscribed, please do so. And if you feel like this video was helpful, please make sure that you like the video and also share the video so you can help others. And thank you so much for joining in today. I will see you next week, where I will be continuing with page 6, which is a continuation of this story, where we will see Tsotsi leaving the room with the gang and leading the gang to the train station, where they will meet their first victim, Gampo.